Imagine a time where record inflation would be 1.5% and money was actually worth something real. A time when things were simpler and people actually trusted the banks. I mean, apart from widespread poverty and death waiting round every corner, times were pretty good before the Federal Reserve ruined it. Or did they actually make things better? Let's find out what the gold standard really was. First, we need to know why the dollar was backed by gold. Under a gold standard, the monetary unit is defined as a certain amount of gold, like $1 is equal to 10 grams of gold. In the era of the international gold standard, before World War I, the US dollar was defined as 1 ounce of gold for $20.67. At the time of writing, 1 ounce of gold today is worth $4,167.62. The dollar being backed by gold meant very low inflation. Average inflation was 0.5%, and it also meant that your money was tradable for solid gold. That means you could go into a bank with your $20.67 and exchange it directly for an ounce of gold. So why did the United States leave the gold standard? Well, one of the drawbacks was that banks were only able to give out so much banknotes in exchange for gold before the vault was be empty. This would lead to mass panic and everyone trying to get their gold out of the banks. Look at this photo from Wall Street in 1907. That's people waiting outside the banks to collect their gold before it's gone. So to stop this from happening, the government decided instead of having a lot of small private banks with gold, they would create one big bank, the Bank of Banks, the Federal Reserve, commonly known as the Fed. The Federal Reserve would be the boss of the smaller banks and set the rules. Although the dollar was still on the gold standard, you could no longer go and exchange your money for gold. The Fed would also be in control of how much banknotes were floating around the economy. So now the Fed pretty much controls how the economy works. Now let's blast past the roaring 20s and stop at 1929, the Great Depression. All the Fed had to do to kickstart the economy was print more money and get it into circulation. Unfortunately, that's harder to do when the money is pegged to the supply of gold. To cut a long story short, the US left the gold standard because it constrained the federal government. The ability to exchange your dollars for gold limited money printing when the Fed thought money printing would be a good idea. The stages of coming off the gold standard. There were 2 stages of the US coming off the gold standard. The first was in 1933 under President Roosevelt. The private ownership and use of gold coins was outlawed. US citizens and commercial banks were ordered to turn in their gold coins and bullion to the Fed in exchange for dollar bills. Now the dollar is purely only valuable because of belief and trust in the government. Now the use and value of gold didn't end there. In 1944, as the Second World War was coming to an end, in a few short years, the United States had pretty much just become the world's superpower. During the war, Allied countries paid America in gold for ammunition and weaponry, so by the time the war had finished, America pretty much had everyone's gold. At the time, there were talks of one global currency, but America said, why don't we just make the dollar the world's currency, since the dollar is still backed by gold anyway. You guys can buy the dollar, and anytime you want, you can come back and exchange it for gold. Even though normal citizens aren't allowed to do that, we'll let you guys do it. And they agreed. But as usual with the Fed, they didn't keep their promise and started printing more money than they had gold. And throughout the 60s, the French wanted their gold back. The story goes that they sent a naval vessel to the US to pick up what they were due, and by the time the French had collected what was theirs, the treasury was out of gold. Then in 1971, Richard Nixon announced that the dollar was officially off the gold standard. And that's pretty much it, a quick history lesson on what the gold standard was and how it ended. But was it worth it? Well, now our currency and the global economy rest in the hands of about 20 people who work in a big white building in Washington, D.C. Their only job is to predict the future and make sure our belief in the dollar doesn't fade away. But that doesn't mean they've done a bad job. Being able to print more money has been able to get us out of crises fast, like the 2008 downturn and during the COVID pandemic. There are also people who believe they've done a bad job, they've caused high inflation, and the people in charge of the Fed are the one who won't feel the effect of their bad decisions. Being in charge of the state of the global economy is a big responsibility for a few people in suits. But a lot of economists say that, yes, the Fed makes mistakes from time to time, but it's the best version of a modern complex economy. What do you think? Let me know in the comments after you've liked and subscribed. We hope you enjoyed this video from Minted, and we look forward to seeing you again. Adios.